Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today as we come together to learn more about cloud architecture and security. My name is Hussam Mohsine. I'm the program manager for Microsoft Reactor Abu Dhabi. Microsoft Reactors are hubs for founders and developers to come, meet, learn, and connect to local peers as well as industry-leading ideas and technology from Microsoft partners and the open source community. It's also home to the Microsoft for Startups program, with a diverse mix of hands-on workshops, expert panels, and community events. There is something for everyone. Check out our calendar of events on meetup.com and join our coming sessions. Our speaker today is Ahmed Nabil. Ahmed has more than 17 years of experience in the field of information technology, information security, IT infrastructure, project management, risk management, application automation, and IT management. Ahmed is an industry expert in information security and digital transformation, public speaker at several international conferences, and author of several articles published in different international security magazines. Feel free to ask questions during the session. We will have regular stops to answer these questions, and also feel free to tweet about the session and tag us on Reactor Abu Dhabi, and the Twitter handle is MSFT Reactor. With all that said, I hand over the mic to our speaker to start the session.
Thank you, Sam. So, can everyone see my presentation? Am I audible?
Yes, all is good.
Thanks. So, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your location and your zone. So, as far as I understood from Hussam, this session is streamed across different locations. We are based here in UAE, as Hussam mentioned, but I'm expecting a lot of people from different parts of the world. So, thank you for attending this session. My name is Ahmed Nabil. I'm a cloud security architect. I'm Microsoft MVP, and I've been on this journey for the cloud maybe for the last 7-8 years, focus on cloud and cloud security. These are my contacts and my social media, and I would really appreciate if someone would get in touch for any questions or just learning from each other. So let's jump in the session. So what is cloud computing? When we think of cloud computing based on the NIST definition, which is the main official definition for cloud, we're going to find that cloud, or the NIST definition, is based on mainly on availability things. And it's on-demand self-service, the broad network access, the resource pooling, rapid elasticity, measured services. Most of these things is about how the operation is transitioning, the availability of the cloud for the customers. But does this really help us as security professionals? Nothing here is rated actually on security. And the problem is that there is a misconception that people think that by moving to the cloud, they are totally secure. Maybe this is a problem of sales pitching or whatever marketing, but they have this assumption that the cloud by default is secure. And whatever you need to think about it, some other areas of concern. Is this really true? I don't think so. So last summer, on summer 2019, there was a huge attack on Capital One, which was really established on the AWS cloud services. So more than 100 million individuals' personal information was stolen from Capital One AWS. And then what was the problem? So a lot of people speculated that this breach was most probably perhaps the result of a previously known unknown zero-day flow, which is very common, or maybe an insider attack, or some of the most traditional type of attacks that cause this flow. However, after further investigation, it was determined that this mainly was a problem of a misconfigured WAF, or a web application firewall, that Capital One was using as part of its operation, which is hosted in the cloud with Amazon Web Services. Yes, maybe maybe for the cloud provider, in this case Amazon, maybe they should have done some kind of extra precautions by maybe checking the commands, information, and the requests, because this was a very common attack, the server-side request forgery. However, this was not the main problem. The problem is that someone misconfigured the WAF, the web application firewalls, and by misconfigure, I mean that it was loaded by an excessive privileges. Excessive privileges mean the attacker was able to use these privileges to read the contents of these sensitive documents in their cloud, private cloud. Again, back to the essentials, back to the basics. Least privilege. This was the least privilege. So this was not configured, and this allowed this major hack to happen last year. So we are not 100% secure because we just moved to the cloud. There are some roles and responsibilities that we need to take care while in the cloud. This might slightly differ or slightly change from the on-premise, the old way, but there are still some roles and responsibilities that we need to adhere. And that's why in this session, I'm trying to share some of this new mindset, some of this new architecture concepts about the cloud and the security of the cloud. Threat evolution is accelerating. That's a fact. So back in the old days, mainly it was about the mass distribution malware. The mass distribution malware, where the malware had been sent for everyone by different mediums to the whole network or to all the PCs to infect them. However, these were the old days. We have noticed an increased maturity in the attacker business models, where there are some new criminal entrants, some new motives, some people using new attack kits, affiliate models. And these criminals and these new entrants are really disrupting this kind of market of the malware. So now we can see something like the tailored, the targeted malwares, where big organizations, sometimes countries, are funding this kind of malware, this kind of targeted attacks on specific targets, users, or organizations. We see something like the fileless malware. Normally with the malware, there will be some kind of file that you can detect it with your own antivirus, with your own EDR tool, with something like this. But we have now something like fileless malware. And these file malwares are something like the PowerShell, file-based detection using PowerShell that can load a text code directly into the memory and other similar methods, which is not, there's no some kind of physical file that you can detect at the end. It's some kind of code running in a memory. We have seen something like malwareless attack, something with no malware at all. And a very good example would be social engineering. People trying to work hard on one of the weakest and might be the strongest links in the security chain, which is the human himself, trying to deceive them, trying to circumvent them, go through them, try to get the information, try to ask them for their usernames and password, and they will deliberately give this username and password and this information for the attacker without even having any malware implanted in it. So when you think about the security and the cloud, we need to understand that we are in a complete transformation. Your organization is in a complete transformation. Take an example what's happening now in the COVID-19 or the Corona. So there was a lot of fun stories on the internet. One of them was a very funny question asking about what is the main driver for the digital transformation in your organization? Is it the CEO or the CFO or the CIO, or is it the COVID or the Corona? So really it was the COVID and Corona that really forced everyone and every organization to switch and digitally transform their organization, their way of business. So a lot of businesses are transforming rapidly to compete with digital native startups. Remember, there's these new digital native startups that are coming up, and they are changing the whole equation. Think of companies like Uber, other companies who changed the whole industry and forced some other organization to be phased out of history. So this is one of the main problems. These are the transformation components that support the business transformation that will provide challenges and opportunities for information security. So with this complete transformation, we see challenges and opportunities. The challenges are, of course, significant. You are moving from your on-prem to a public cloud owned by someone else. So actually, instead of managing your computer, you're giving your computer to someone else maybe thousands of miles to manage it. This is very clear. However, there is a massive opportunity as well, massive opportunity to solve some long-standing security problems with this next generation of computing. Remember, when you're on-premise, you might have some limited resources, some limited skills to apply or do things, to configure things. Now, with the move to the cloud, you might get the opportunity. You might really get the opportunity to leverage a lot of the cloud services, especially in security. With a complete digital transformation, you can see a lot of services everywhere that people, the users, are demanding a full first mobile class experience on their devices. They need a real mobile class experience on their mobile devices. So back 2, 3, 4 years back in these days, you always get something called a desktop app and how it looks in desktop and then how it looks on the mobile. And always on the mobile to be stripped down. There were some features that are not used, maybe, or some feature that you cannot leverage on the mobile. People are demanding full class experience on these mobile devices. New entrants like the IoT. And with the IoT, which in the Internet of Things technology, this is fueling major disruptions because it's totally different animal. You cannot treat it as the normal technology. It has its own specs, it has its own security checks, it has its own security zones and configuration, which is totally different than the normal. And then on top of them, we have the cloud technology with the three platforms, the three main platforms, which is the software as a service, the platform as a service, and the infrastructure as a service. So these are comparing the whole picture of the digital transformation that's happening to your organization. And then with this new transformation, we become to have now something called two perimeters. Now for security, for a long time, the main perimeter for security was the network perimeter. You were able to defend your organization based on the network perimeter. So this is my network, and I'm protecting my network, for example, with a firewall, and then I have some defenses, I have some guards, and this is my perimeter, and I'm protecting it. So think of protecting in the old days as kind of network zones. If I want to go to my office back in the old days, I have to cross the main gate, I have to cross the security guard, I have to enter the organization, I have to sit in front of my computer, connect to my network, and then access my files. Now, with the cloud, this is totally different. There's no network perimeter. Everyone nowadays, really, especially nowadays, are accessing their data, their servers, their resources from anywhere and on different platforms. Some of them are Windows, some of them tablets, some of them Mac, some of them Linux, on different platforms. Really, the true power of the cloud is coming here. So this switches to two kind of perimeters, which is the classic perimeters, the network perimeter, and the modern perimeter, which is the identity. So with the new perimeter, when you're just connecting on any device, accessing your resource on any place on Earth, there's no network perimeter. The only perimeter, the only defense you have to this that can verify you is your identity. And that's the main thing. Whenever you think of switching to the cloud, the main thing you should think about it is the identity. I'm not talking about only the business clouds. Think about any cloud service. If you're switching to a Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, anything, the main control here is your identity. And we've seen a lot of attacks on Facebook and LinkedIn and a lot of services lately, a lot of leakage of passwords, and they're even sold in the dark market. The only protection you have here is protecting your identity, which is like, for example, applying at least something better than a password, which is something like an MFA, which will come through next. So I think we will be running these two dual perimeters for a long time, both the classic perimeters and the modern perimeter, which is the identity perimeter. So as we mentioned, we are in complete transformation. Enterprise IT is now cloud hybrid. So I believe, again, this is something that will last for some time. There's no complete cloud migration here. So no one will just transform his on-premise to a cloud and just shut down everything. For some time, we will be living with these two different platforms, something on-premise and something in cloud, which is called hybrid. So this will be how we'll be going in the cloud for maybe the next few years. Technology, mobility, and volume is exploding. Increased demands first-class experience for mobile devices. A lot of these MDMs, the mobile device management softwares, are now revolutionarily changing, offering more and better really first-class experience on their mobile devices. The pervasive digital transformation, IT adoption during a wave of app development and cloud usage. I've been lucky and working with a lot of companies and consulting a lot of companies working in different IoT services. IoT, this is a kind of a new game changer, especially for industrial application. And then with all of this, we are having an increased hostile environment because simply the attack surface have increased. So back in the old days, remember, we just have our machines, we have our firewall, and we have our network, and this is our attack service. These are the IPs exposed on the internet, and that's it. That's our attack service, and we're protecting it. Now, we're talking about different endpoint devices, whether they're Windows, Mac, Android, all over the world. We're talking about some services in the cloud, some SaaS services, some infrastructure service. The attack service itself is increasing, which will dramatically increase the kind of threats that we can have. And the main problem, there will be some blind spots in this new things. So we're having now a very, very huge attack surface area. It's easily that you can miss some blind spots in your surface area, which will really, really need some kind of monitoring techniques. So now we mentioned something about the identity, since you're moving to the cloud. Next thing we need to think about it with some monitoring techniques that you can be seeing all your surface. Some visibility will be needed here. And then when I talk about the cloud architecture, I would like to go to the basics again, which is the cloud and customer shared responsibility model. This is the main model that really, really explains what is required from the cloud and what's required from the customer. This is the basics. Anyone moving to cloud, you need to check this. So we have the main three platforms, which is the infrastructure as a service, which means you are dealing with infrastructure. Yes, the cloud service provider is providing you some data centers, networks. However, you're building your machines and all these kind of things. If you move to the platform as a service, then your cloud service provider will be adding maybe some database application, adding some operating system on top of this. However, you will be configuring it and doing some codes development on this. And if you move to the top notch, which is the software as a service, where the cloud service provider is taking care of everything. And here comes the misconception. People think that the cloud service provider is handling everything. As you can see in this slide, there are still some responsibilities here. The top three responsibilities for you when you're using this software as a service model, which is the data protection, the information. So yes, the cloud provider is providing you with the software, operating system, everything. However, the data inside this is still your own data. You still have the utmost ownership and responsibility on this data. Yes, you can leverage a lot of the tools, a lot of the technologies provided by the cloud service provider. However, this is still your own ownership, your own responsibility. The second thing is the devices. You're allowing a lot of people to connect from different devices across the world. How are you going to protect this? And then third, and one of the most important things, as I mentioned, is the accounts and the identities. Let's think of the three things: the information protection and the devices and the identity. When you think about the information protection, what's the challenges of the information protections? So first of all, you need to label and track all your data. So just imagine, for example, I'm sending a confidential file to someone else where I don't know exactly where he will consume it, on which device, maybe in which location. If there's some kind of mechanism that I'm protecting this data, I'm labeling this data, I'm stamping it as a confidential, and I'm ensuring that only this person is the only one who can open this data, then this will give me some kind of assurance that I'm protected. If I'm sending a document and then this guy is the only one who have access to it, so if this document leaked someone, or maybe it was copied by mistake, or someone in between and attacker get a grasp of this document, I'm not worried about this document because it's only intended for this one. So we need a kind of a labeling, tracking of this data. Remember back in the army, when you see in the movies, when the people were just sealing this confidential, secret, and public labels on the documents, and physical documents, this is the same thing. We need to do it on our documents electronically. And by sealing this and by putting protection, we are invoking a lot of things like encryption, for example. We need to implement some corporate policy to protect different levels of sensitive data. So all our data are not sensitive. We have some data that can be shared with public. We have some data that can be shared internally, for example. We have some data that cannot be shared. We need to have this kind of corporate thing to think about it. challenges as well would be how do you discover and classify this data. So let's assume now we implemented a kind of a good solution that will, from now on, will start to label, protect, classify, and track my documents. What about the old documents? What about my 10, 20 years history of documents saved on some SharePoint or some file shares or in the emails or in the storage? We need something to classify, to search for this, look for some keywords, and then apply some labels automatically. These are the kind of challenges, so kind of things you need to think about when you're picking up your next information protection technology. Microsoft have been using information protection, have been evolving information protection for the last maybe 6-7 years. So they used to have this RMS, the Right Management Service, and now it's evolved to become the Azure Information Protection. Now it became the Microsoft Unified Labeling Information Protection. And with this, you can easily discover, classify, protect, and monitor. Discover means you can just search and discover in your old data which of these old databases and some keywords, classify them automatically, or maybe by the user, he can apply some labels manually. This should be internal, this should be classified, this should be secret, this should be public. Then protect it. For example, for the secret one, you can apply some kind of encryption to protect these documents. You can apply some rules. No one can print it, no one can copy it, maybe only can read it. All kind of protections you're looking for. The second thing you need to look about is the enterprise integration. So we're not looking only about, for example, if you're talking about the Microsoft information protection, we're not looking only about Office. Yes, Microsoft Office, Word, and Excel are something like maybe 60% or 50% of your business documents, but there's some other things like, for example, Adobe, the PDFs, some maybe engineering documents like AutoCAD. So you need to think of the whole ecosystem. When picking a tool, you need to think of a tool that can really covers the whole ecosystem in your environment. So Microsoft, for example, have been doing a lot of integrations with different third parties, like Adobe, for example. So in my opinion, if you have Adobe and Microsoft Office, this might comprise something like 70 or 80% of all your business data, as well as other third parties. And they have the SDKs that you can integrate with some more and more third parties. The next thing is the DLP integration. So now what we need to think about, we need some kind of tool that will classify and label and protect my documents. This is the first thing. And this should span the whole ecosystem, which means it's not only Microsoft, but other documents. Okay, that's done. The next thing is apply the DLP. So most probably you have some DLP checkpoints, maybe your Office 365, maybe your email, maybe your endpoint client that, for example, will trigger an alert. For example, if someone is sending, let's assume someone is sending a very secret or sensitive document across your mail system, and this sensitive document, based on your classification and rating, should not be sent or shared externally. So there must be something on the external gateways that will alert you. Hey, there's someone sending something critical over the mail. Hey, there's someone sending something critical using his computer, maybe copying it to a USB. So the third thing you need to think about it is this tool should be fully integrated with your DLP solutions. And again, why I mentioned Microsoft, since we are in a full Microsoft session. So Microsoft solution, they approach the three things. So by integrating the whole, when they move to the unified information protection, the new unified Microsoft information protection, because they were unifying it across the whole ecosystem. So now your Office 365, your MCAS, your endpoints, all of them now understand these labels and can apply some data leakage protection, DLP rules, to prevent them from going outside the network or at least alerting you about this. So how can I start classification and implementation? Start simply by defining what you need to classify. Where is the sources you need to classify? I have some sources here in emails. I have some in SharePoint, file shares. Define some conditions based on what I'm going to classify. What are the conditions? And then create your policy. Maybe you can start by classification only. Don't apply protection at the beginning. Just apply by classification. Just introduce this classification for users. Tell them we have these kind of labels. We have this kind of classification mechanism. Let them understand without putting any restrictions now or any any kind of protection, because users tend at the beginning, when they don't understand, to circumvent this. So for example, if you're having kind of a secret document or super confidential document, and this will have some restrictions and encryption, all these kind of things. So users, if they don't understand this at the beginning, they will say that this document is not secret, is not confidential. They will lie and change this document to maybe a public or internal, just to avoid all these kind of hassles that the information security and information technology people implemented. So start first by classification. Don't put any protection at the beginning. Let the people understand and the user understand what are these labels. And then awareness programs should be always and continuous on this. And once they understand this classification, once they feel free classifying their own documents and the new documents, then you can introduce the protection. Second, as we mentioned, is the identity. What are the challenges? We're having a lot of things with the passwords. We have a lot of phishing, password spray attacks. These are the main kind of attacks happening always. A lot of phishing. Take the COVID, for example, or the corona. I can share with you maybe later after the session. There's the number of phishing emails and the spear phishing exercises that have been happening since the COVID and the corona started are massive. People are receiving a lot of mails to check the status and the alerts and the current status for the countries and the numbers for COVID numbers, and across the mails massively. Attackers are smart. They're using, unfortunately, this situation, this pandemic situation, and they're sending a lot of phishing mails based on this. And guess what? People are still falling. Again, it's the human nature and clicking some of these links. And with this clicking these links, maybe they are revealing their passwords, or maybe they are allowing some kind of malware to implement it. So the first thing, protect your identity. Apply at least MFA, multi-factor authentication. Second thing, just invoke your phone, for example. So you connect using your username and password, and you receive a token, or maybe receive a number on your phone, on your app on your mobile. Microsoft has a very nice app, which is the Authenticator, the Microsoft Authenticator app, which is not only working with Microsoft, you can add all kind of accounts of it, like Facebook, Amazon, Google, anything, and use it as a second authentication for your identity, protecting your identity. Nowadays, even we're moving to passwordless. And with the passwords, maybe of the camera identifying you, maybe using your fingerprint, maybe using some USB keys that you can connect with it. And these are protecting your identity. So the main idea is protecting your identity in this cloud way. Compromised device and accounts. Now a new thing called zero trust. So people following NIST's publication, they issued the publication end of last year, a draft publication on the zero trust, which means that it's nothing is trusted not by granted. So for example, if you are connecting on one site or one application, this doesn't mean that we will trust this connection for the next application, next connection. Every time you will be checked. At each endpoint, at each application, at each database, at each network, you will be asked to verify your identity. This is the new model of zero trust. Other challenges, admin and privilege accounts. So MFA and all this kind of things are even for the normal accounts. What about the admin accounts, the super users in your environment, the people that has access to the crown jewels of your organization? These are the privilege accounts. These are the admin accounts. What are the possible things we have? First of all, they need to log from a specific machine. So if you're doing a kind of a privilege or admin task, you cannot do this privilege admin task from your normal machine. You need to do it from a privilege access machine. You cannot do connecting to the internet, checking your mail from the same machine where you are doing the privilege access. So if you got a virus or something on this node because you're accessing the internet and accessing the mail, this will typically infect whatever you're doing. You need to apply an IAM program, Identity Access Management Program, something like PAM or PIM, to introduce in your environment, which is a privileged identity management software. Microsoft has the Microsoft PIM, which is privileged identity management, targeting your cloud identities, how to protect them. So, for example, if I'm an admin, I should not be an admin for 24/7. So when I need only the admin permission, I'll be logging to this software, activating my admin permission, using it, and once I'm done, that's it. So I'm not a 24/7. So if I'm in the weekend, I'm enjoying the weekend with my family or something like this, I don't need to be an admin. So if someone tried to attack my account, nothing will happen. My account doesn't have the admin trigger or the admin activated. Only when I need to do some work, some job, I will activate my admin privilege permission. Third-party account risks. This has been there for a long time. You need to invite some people, some vendors, some partners to connect to your environment, to work with you. And typically what will happen is that you need to maybe create some accounts for them, some accounts, and give them some accounts from your domain, from your environment. And then these accounts will be sometimes missed, left over, because it's not totally controlled. It's a complete headache for all the admins. Now, with the new technologies, you can leverage the single sign-on. You can use technologies like SAML to integrate with other identity providers. So for example, if some other identity provider, even if it's a Facebook, Google, some other different identity provider, you can integrate with them, third-party integration, things like SAML, so they can connect with their own accounts, and you can force your own policies on these accounts. So this is kind of challenges and the recommended approach you need to think when you're talking about the identity and access management. Third piece is the clients, the device. As I mentioned, with the clients and devices, they're accessing anywhere. People are now adopting this bring your own devices, different platforms, and these things are consuming and accessing your data. You need to think of a cross-platform security management. So you need to think of something that can really manage the whole environment, Windows, Mac, Linux. You need to think of a really modern MDM solution that can really help to do this. You need to have an endpoint protection, an endpoint detection response client, a very powerful client that's available on these machines. So in case something happened or there's any problem, they can easily detect it. And this can be forced with the MDM. So for example, if you have someone that bought a new machine at home, he needs to connect to your company organization, sure, no problem. You're going to install your client, your MDM client, and then you're going to have some kind of policies need to be checked. You need to have some kind of endpoint, you need maybe to have some firewall, you need to have some rules, blah, blah, blah. And once his machine is ready, is healthy, he can join your network. These are the kind of things you need to think about when you're going to the clients, the mobile devices, things like MDM, which is the mobile device management. When you go to the cloud again, you're going to find some different terminology and different tools. The three main things here are the CASB, the CWPP, and the CSPM. So CASB stands for the Cloud Security Access Broker. The CWPP stands for the Cloud Workload Protection Platform. And the CSPM stands for the Cloud Security Posture Management. So as you can see, these are positioned based on the kind of model you're using, whether it's SaaS, IaaS, or PaaS. Let's think of the CASB. The CASB, the Cloud Access Security Broker, are like your proxy, as like your firewall, your gateway between your on-prem and the cloud. So they are on-premise cloud-based security enforcement points placed between the cloud service consumers and cloud service providers to combine, interject into private security policies as the cloud-based resources are accessed. Microsoft has a very famous product, the MCAS. It's even been featured in Gartner as one of the top products for this. Now you can understand what your users are doing with some other platforms. So now you can see if users are installing some different softwares, connecting to different, maybe someone in your organization connecting to maybe Google Drive, or maybe some other box, for example, service. And then you can have this visibility by using these cloud brokers, this proxy, because they are passing through these proxies to others. The cloud security posture management. This is your posture. This is your posture management, how you look. So this includes some use cases for compliance assessment. So how you look in from the cloud best practice. So let's assume you have some kind of cloud best practices that you need to be implemented. And then how do you really fit? How do you look? Are you good on this? Think of Microsoft, people have been using something like Secure Score, which gives you a score of everything. So for example, let's assume that MFA will give you something like 20 points if you implement it. So if you implemented MFA, then you got 20 out maybe of 100. If you didn't implement it, then it's still 0 out of 100. So this kind of tools give you the posture, how you look from the cloud best practices. A very good example of Microsoft would be the Secure Score. And then the third one would be the cloud workload protection. And this is the protection, how you push, for example, your antivirus, how you check, for example, that your servers that you have built are matching the best practices or the benchmarks that you need to push. So this is mainly about how to protect the workloads to be migrated, how to think of them from a protection workview. So as you can see, the CASB is the SaaS top on the top because it's proxy between your cloud services, and then with the CSPM and CWPP, they are spanning between the PaaS, IaaS, and some touching about the SaaS, because this is about the posture, about how you look, about how you can protect later on. So when you think about the cloud drivers and cloud challenges, what are the real challenges with the cloud, with the drivers? Is the risk assessment. We need to ensure that risk assessment is an integral part of any cloud strategy process. So you need to think about this and then think about it in a different way. So for example, you are in a cloud. You're already in a cloud, whatever the cloud it is, whatever the vendor it is. Think, why would you like to exit at one point of time? So maybe I'm now working in a cloud and then I got some kind of business in some kind of country, and then there's some regulation, for example, that mandates I cannot use the cloud during this business. So I will exit the cloud because I cannot do this business in the cloud. So this, I can't think of it on the opposite way. Then we need to do this risk assessment from the beginning on the agility, the availability, security, supplier, compliance, like the regulatory, all the legal requirements. And based on this risk assessment, you're going to take the right approach to the move to the cloud and picking the right model as well. Maybe even picking the right implementation. For example, things like the regulations, because this has been the major thing for the security people on the cloud. Things like regulations like GDPR, for example. Sometimes, yes, you can work the cloud, but for example, you cannot move your data outside of the European zone. So you need to think when you're moving to the cloud that they're going to put for this project or this business, everything hosted in the Europe. I can't, for example, host it in Africa, in America, in Asia. Everything would be hosted in Europe. So think about it as a risk assessment. As I mentioned, you can think differently. What will be the main things that will require me to exit at one point of time? When you think about the cybersecurity from the CXO's lens, you need to show a plan for aggressive cyber risk management, show a communication plan for risk and instance, and show how security policies reflect compliance again and security aims. There's always this debate between the effectiveness and the efficiency. Are we doing it well, and how much is enough? Because we might overburn with a lot of things. With effectiveness, are we doing it well? We need to think of two main things, which is increasing the cost of attack. I need to make it really, really super difficult for any attacker to attack me. I'm increasing the cost of attack. It will become very, very highly costly for him to attack my organization or my entities, and at the end, if he is not targeted, of course, he will give up. And then at the main point, at the main item also, you need to decrease the mean time to remediation. So we are increasing the cost of attack, and also we are decreasing the mean time to remediation. So in case something happened, some problem happened, what is the mean time to remediate, to come back? We need to reduce the opportunity to do damage and increase the overall cost of attack. When you think about efficiency, how much is enough? Then we need to think about, is my risk lower than my appetite or not? Because every company will have its own risk appetite, the own thing that we can tolerate. And then, am I putting a lot of controls on this or not? Think of putting kind of a door that costs, for example, 100,000 to protect something inside that's maybe 50,000 only. We need to ensure, are we efficient or not? Think of your current risk appetite and the exposure based on this as well. Most attackers, we need to understand that they have a kind of supply chain. And this supply chain is very critical because you face ecosystem, not just hackers and malwares. It's a complete ecosystem. And the defenses must address this kind of current attack controls. Attack services, unfortunately, are inexpensive. Some of these numbers, I think, came from last year. And then you can see, for example, that 0 days, which is the most expensive thing, will range from 5,000 to 350,000. 0 days means something that has no defenses, something that's really, 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 if someone used this, it will really hurt you because there's no current defense about it. There's no malware, there's no patch. It's kind of 0 day. It has nothing about it. And this is the most expensive thing. But I think of something like, for example, the denial of services. We can say this $100 per day, $300 per week. These are kind of metrics. These are cheap. So that's why the attacks are increasing dramatically, because these services are sold in dark markets as well. Cybersecurity is a challenging space, as we have discussed. Cyber risk is hard to quantify. Mitigations need to be an early day. And then one of the most important things is getting harder, the reporting. So for example, GDPR requires you at least less or maybe 3 days to report this breach. This is mandated by the regulator. If you're not doing this, you'll be fined, and it's really enormous fines. So can you really scope a breach, a major breach, really that fast in 3 days? That's the kind of challenges we are having in the cybersecurity. And then we go with the cyber resiliency. We need to align, integrate the cybersecurity with our business process initiative. Then we have 3 things to think about, which is the mindset, the cloud, and the hygiene. We need to have a mindset that assumes compromise. No one is bulletproof. We might get compromised as one thing. This question is, how long does it take me to recover, maybe? How long to respond and get back? And is it really, really expensive for this attacker or not? We can use the cloud technology for, again, this is the opportunities we've said, tapping into a lot of knowledge bases, using a lot of best practice by someone else. And then the hygiene. We need to lower our risk, identifying the well-known risk. Think of the responsibility matrix. What must I do? This is the basic housekeeping. No one can nowadays go just in the cloud using a normal username and password. An unnamed CFO mentioned that the problem with CISOs and the entire cybersecurity field, for that matter, is that you keep asking for more money. We keep asking for more money as security and resources, but we cannot guarantee or even articulate why I'm buying this. I need to map this to the kind of environment. I need to map this to the business models. We are a business enabler. We are not the kind of a cost center anymore. We are a business enabler. I need to map this to what the business is doing, actually. Another challenge is the clouds and the costs. So again, this is one of the worst things happens with some sales pitching or maybe marketing people, that, okay, so the first thing we mentioned, that cloud is bulletproof, secure. And the second thing, oh, cloud is very cheap. So when you move from on-premise to the cloud, there will be huge savings. That's not correct, actually. So when you move from on-prem to the cloud, there's sometimes, because you need to implement things, you need to do some kind of migration. Maybe you will do some kind of software changes. Remember, some people are still using a very old software that need to modernize this kind of old. Maybe some application using some old non-SSO local accounts that need to be moved to the SSO, need to be moved single sign-on. You need to acquire some kind of cloud cost skills. So at the beginning, and there will be some increase in the cloud cost for all these kind of aspects until optimization happens, and now you can get some benefits out of your cloud. So if you're moving to the cloud, don't be surprised at the beginning, you might be paying a little bit of more things. And then it depends on how you're dealing, how you're handling this project, and how you're effectively optimizing this to reach a real optimized things. So this is very important. You have to think about this when you're moving to the cloud. For example, think about renting or buying a house for a long period. For example, short-term renting will be inexpensive. So for example, if you're thinking, if now I'm renting, if I'm living alone, I need to rent maybe a 1-bedroom apartment, and then maybe after 2 years I get married, so maybe I'll think of upgrading. Maybe I'll get some children. After 2-3 years, I need maybe to upgrade to another 3-bedroom. So now it's changing, and that's the mode of the cloud. You're always changing. So you're going today, buying a couple of servers, maybe expanding, maybe the business is booming, maybe there's some recession, so you're growing. This is a kind of mood. So with the short-term renting, with the short cloud, you're moving. But instead, if you bought a very long-term buying, this might be very expensive on the long term because it's not utilized. Remember, when the cloud starts with the virtualization, and the main idea of the virtualization that we used to have in our data center servers that are maybe 60 or 70% not consumed, massive RAMs, massive CPUs, and no one is using it. This kind of cloud cost also need to be in your idea. The changing role of the IT and security. So over time, I think IT department may adopt role similar to the HR department. It's really funny, but when you think about it, when you think about the HR, so HR is really pushing everything and controlling everything through others, through other people, through the other head department, maybe managers, pushing the policy, doing everything through this. And I think the IT will change to be similar like this. So you will not be able to do everything by yourself. You need to be implement, install, and configure by yourself. You're changing now from a provider to an operator. And there you need to focus mainly on the monitoring and the cost of the monitoring and the performance and other things like the third-party risk. These are the main challenges when we think about going to cloud, which is the cost, the role of IT and security, and the risks. And thinking about the risk and positioning your services based on your environment, thinking about things like resilience and how you can really affect, increase the mean time to recover and the cost for the attacker as well. We need to carefully select and monitor our cloud providers. We need to think of a cloud provider that's compliant with most of the things I'm looking for. So if I'm for example, looking for this kind of regulation, this kind of standard, I need to ensure that he's really compliant to all those kind of things. The alignment, does the provider compete with our organization or not? We need to align on this. Data ownership and mining. Does provider partners underlying providers mine our data or our customer data? We need to think about this. And then the security and the privacy. Responsible, how they execute on the security best practice. How are they updated? How are they changing and evolving in this kind of security? The responsiveness, how they will rapidly correct security issues. Security problems might happen. It will always happen. And really, believe me that the people dealing with these major cloud providers will most probably be better positioned than a normal on-premise application, but things will happen. How do they correct rapidly these things? How do you resolve it? Are they transparent about these things? Are they going to notify me if something happened or not? Or you just keep it uncleared? These are kind of things you need to think about. Satya Nadella said that businesses and users are going to embrace technology only if they can trust it. People and users will only use technology if they can only trust it. A very good example, what happened during the COVID and the Corona and the start of the COVID and Corona, different multiple video conferencing and collaboration tools were introduced. I don't want to mention the name, but a very famous tool that have been hammered with a lot of bugs and security flows and all those kind of things. Maybe they were not ready for this change. And as a result, if the people are not trusting this platform, they might switch. You might lose the opportunity. You might lose your chance in the market. And this is very critical. People will not embrace technology unless they trust it. This is a very crucial thing we need to think about it. So let me ramp with some recommendation. So cloud strategy should follow the business strategy. We are not living in a different era. We're not living in a different place. We are following the business strategy. We need to enable them to deliver what they need to do. You need to establish a cloud security policy. I can find a lot of organizations, they have the information security policy, all kind of policy to think about. But when someone, for example, asks for, do you have a cloud security policy? That's a problem. The cloud usage should be on risk domains. Remember the risk assessments, how I should assess the risk? Think it differently. Why I would be able to exit the cloud. So think about the cloud based on risk domains. Cost optimization. Cost optimization will happen once everything is normalized. Remember, if you're an old, gigantic organization moving to the cloud, there is a lot of legacy things happening there. Some of them will need some rework, some modernization to be moved to the cloud. Here you need to think about the cost optimization. Resiliency. Remember resiliency. How can we recover? How can we respond? Is it fast or not? Portability. A very important thing is the portability, which is mainly about how agile are you. So there's a lot of things here, like the new DevOps things that are introduced, the Dockers, the Kubernetes, a lot of these things that allow you can easily move from one cloud to another cloud. Or for some organizations that I've witnessed, they need to have by strategy 2 different clouds. One cloud maybe for production and one cloud maybe as their backup or as this disaster recovery. So with something like portability, and we're leveraging these new technologies, which should be in your strategy. So if I have in my strategy the portability, I'll be moving, for example, everything's virtual, using something like Dockers, which will allow me to easily move these things from one cloud to another. And finally, we need to think about the cloud selection and how we will select our clouds, how we're going to monitor it. We need to think of a very, very full monitoring system, monitoring all our clouds again to identify our blind spots. And here with the cloud and with the monitoring, things about solution that really can unify things. One of the major problems with security is that most of the companies, typical companies and organizations, have something like 60 or 70 security tools available in their arsenals. And this is really something, how can you really monitor 60 or 70 alerts coming from everywhere? So with the monitoring and visibility, think about the new cloud native SIMs, the security incident event management and the SOAR, and how they can collect, aggregate and correlate all these kind of logs and give you some meaningful insights and alerts for you. So hopefully it's not been a long session. I tried to share with you some of the ideas moving to the cloud, some of the new architectures, some of the concepts that everyone should be aware of while moving to the cloud, because it's really a different mindset that we need to adapt either now or later. So with this, I would like to thank you. These are again my social contacts, and then I think we can have maybe 5 or 6 minutes to answer a couple of questions.
Thank you, Ahmed, for the great presentation and the session today. And yeah, we had so many questions on the Q&A, starting with the first one on the qualification. Any recommended qualification or courses for someone who's going into cloud architecture and security? Where can they start?
That's a very good question. So, I mean, so let's assume Microsoft, for example. So Microsoft have changed dramatically most of the new certifications now they have. Back if someone been maybe old like me in Microsoft, and then with all this MCPs and MCTs and MCSEs, now everything is changed and being role-based now. So now if you want to do the architecture, there is a very dedicated track to go for the architecture. And then this track is available in Microsoft, Amazon, any cloud provider, you'll have this track. For Microsoft, they have this architecture track. It's 2 exams. And before going to this architecture, you need to have some kind of basics and fundamentals on the cloud. So the typical track or route for an architect will gaining some information about the cloud strategies, the cloud foundation, security. There's some courses by independent organizations like ICS Squared, which is the top. They've been the flagship, for example, for CISP. They have something called the Cloud Security Certified Professional, which gives you the real background on the cloud and the security and the things that we have discussed. And then moving from this would be, for example, going directly to your cloud provider, for example, Microsoft, tapping into the architecture track that they have.
Another question was on that many companies run line of business applications on Windows servers and do not need to scale heavily as the number of users are fixed. So how will such companies benefit from moving to the cloud?
So it depends about the usage of these Windows servers. So again, it will depend from organization to organization how they are using these Windows servers and how they are leveraging it. So if this kind of things that can be used as a rental, or maybe the power is changed. So I'll give you a very good example. So I've been working with some kind of organization where they were doing some kind of an engineering, mathematical, complicated equations. And to do this kind of things, you require a huge performance on your Windows servers, tons of RAMs, processors, and stuff like this. And this would be very expensive to get this in your on-prem servers. So normally to resolve this or to solve this equation, it might take maybe 2 or 3 days running on a powerful medium server that you can afford in on-prem. Now with the cloud, now as you pay as you go, now you can pay for the hour, for the minutes you're using. I can scale up a server, a Windows server that maybe is a massive with tons of RAMs and processors. And I can solve this equation that used to take 3-4 days in maybe 3-4 hours only. And then after I finish this, I will turn off my machine. So now I'm providing a benefit to the business, and here's the real benefit of the cloud. Now I'm providing a benefit to the business. I'm delivering the value to you in a much shorter time, and at the same time, I'm not paying for a server that has, for example, 1 terabyte of RAMs forever. I'm just paying maybe for 3 hours only to solve my equation. So it really depends on how you're approaching this from your company. This is an operation model. Remember, you're moving from a kind of a capital model to a pure operation model with the cloud.
We have a question also from Narayan. In terms of privileged admin accounts, there will be always one admin account which can assign temporary administrative rights. How do we protect that super admin account and its access? And is SPAM a recommended solution for this?
So that's a very good question. So again, because the time of the session was a little bit limited, but I mean, if I talk about the privilege account, maybe you can have only dedicated session about this. So yes, you will have your privilege accounts, which are the admins, the super users that have access to the crown jewels in your organization. And most probably you will onboard all of these accounts on a PAM solution or a privileged identity management solution. However, there will still be some user that is on top of this. And we call this user the break the glass user. So imagine why you need this user. For example, let's assume that you're onboarding all your privilege accounts on a PAM or a privilege identity management solution or privilege access management solution. That's fine. Everything is normal. People are working super happy without any problem. Let's assume problem happened. This software is down. Maybe the internet is down. Any disaster happens. So people are not able to access this PIM or PAM solution to enable their accounts or maybe access their passwords. We are lossless. We cannot do anything. And that's why we need to have something called break the glass account. Think of break the glass and the firefighting. Break the glass account. This is an account that doesn't have any measures. So this is an account that doesn't have an MFA because we don't need any dependency because the MFA can get out. And this happened, by the way. Yes, it happened rarely, but it might happen. So we need to think about the break the glass account with no MFA, not onboarded on a PIM solution. This is the account that will be used only in emergency. However, what are the kind of precautions we need to do with these break the glass accounts? We need to protect them. So maybe, for example, like you see the movies of Mission Impossible, you have the password and then you break the passwords in 2 pieces and keep one password in a safe and other password in another safe. You need to think of a way to protect this kind of account. Also, remember, we mentioned something about the monitoring. So these accounts are only to be used when disaster is declared. So they're not used normally on a typical day. So we need to have a monitoring solution, which is our SIM, for example, that will be monitoring this kind of account and ensuring that no logins, no alerts is coming from this account. For example, if any alert came, this account is trying to log in, then someone is using this account while there's no disaster, nothing, this should be an alert for you. So protecting this break the glass will be monitoring them using your SIM solution and applying some very old school manual protections, like maybe splitting and separating the password in different safe and physical safes.
We had also very frequent requests, I would say, on this sharing the slides. So if that is possible, also we'd love to share them with the community watching us today. I think
sure,
I
will send it to you. I'll just maybe revise it, filter it, and then I will send it to you. Sam, and I think you can share it with the you have the context of the people, of course.
Sounds great. Sounds great. All right. With all that, thank you so much, Ahmed, for this great session, and thank you everyone who joined us today. This session is recorded and also will be made available on YouTube, so you will be able to access it at a later point. And we will also be sharing the content with you. Check out our meetup. Make sure you are also signed up for our future events. There are so many interesting webinars and sessions happening, workshops as well happening in the coming few days. So make sure you're registered and part of our community on Meetup. The name of the account is Microsoft Reactor Abu Dhabi. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Stay safe.
Stay safe, everyone. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.